In a forgotten corner of Fairview Springs, where the scent of engine oil clings to concrete and dreams fade quieter than they arrive, lived a mechanic named Ben Carter. He wasn't famous, he wasn't wealthy, but his hands, calloused and precise, had fixed more broken things than most could count. Just not his own heart. Then one morning, a woman in a wheelchair rolled through his garage doorway, trailing a faulty prosthetic and an air of quiet defiance. Her name was Lily. Her story was a mystery, and her smile somehow unsettled the dust in corners Ben hadn't touched in years. He thought she needed a repair. He had no idea she was about to restore him. What began with a squeaky joint and a borrowed wrench would unravel a truth buried beneath titanium and trust, one that no blueprint could contain. And as the shop fan hummed softly behind them, something unexpected began to shift, one gear at a time. But before any of that, before the prototype, the late nights, the kiss, there was just Ben, alone in the quiet, about to hear wheels on gravel for the first time. And that's where we begin. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Carter's Auto Repair, casting amber light across a cluttered workbench littered with wrenches, coffee-stained blueprints, and a half-assembled transmission. Ben Carter, 56, leaned over an aging Chevy, the sleeves of his faded blue jumpsuit rolled to his elbows, grease marking the lines time had already drawn across his arms. His face was weathered, the kind that told stories of long days under hoods and longer nights spent fixing things people gave up on. Above the bench, a faded photo of his father in army fatigues was taped next to a yellowed certificate. Thomas Carter, Certified Master Mechanic. The signature had smudged over time, but the pride in it hadn't. Ben lived in the apartment above the shop, a cramped space filled with books on biomedical engineering and handwritten sketches of mechanical limbs, dreams shelved long ago when life demanded more practical pursuits. He'd once applied for a prototyping grant to design low-cost prosthetics for disabled veterans, but rejection came fast and cold. Since then, he buried the ambition under layers of routine, oil changes, tire rotations, and the occasional engine rebuild that let his hands remember they were meant to build something more. That morning, as he flipped through the classifieds, he circled yet another rejected job application from a nearby robotics firm. He'd sent them his homemade schematics weeks ago, and all he got was silence. He folded the paper neatly, placed it in a drawer, and went back to what he knew, coaxing life back into machines that others deemed too far gone. Outside, the sound of birds echoed through the quiet street of Fairview Springs. Inside, the familiar whir of his shop's ancient ceiling fan hummed like background music to his solitude. Ben wiped his hands on an old rag, unaware that everything was about to change, not with a phone call or a letter, but with the sound of wheels crunching gravel just outside his door. The moment caught him mid-reach for a socket wrench. The subtle crunch of gravel outside grew louder, then steadied. Ben glanced toward the open garage bay, expecting the usual, a local with brake trouble or maybe Mrs. Donnelly's rusty sedan again. But instead, he saw her. A woman in her early 30s was maneuvering a sleek, lightweight wheelchair over the uneven driveway with remarkable control. Her dark, auburn hair was pulled into a low twist, a few strands escaping to catch the light. As she rolled into the garage, her confidence was clear, but there was a slight delay in one wheel's motion. Then Ben noticed it. Her left leg, or what remained of it, connected to a prosthetic that squeaked with each shift of her weight. "Morning," she said, her voice calm, almost amused by his sudden silence. "I hope this isn't a bad time." Ben set the wrench down, brushing his hands on a rag before stepping forward. "Not at all," he replied. "Something I can help you with?" "I'm Lily Grant," she said, offering her hand. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine. "I've got a prosthetic that's acting up. The hydraulics are sluggish and the socket alignment feels off." He glanced down at the leg, instinctively kneeling to get a better look, only pausing to ask, "Mind if I take a look?" "Go ahead," she nodded. As he examined the joint, he could see the wear, scratched metal, stress lines along the housing. This model's not exactly new, he murmured. Nope, she said with a faint laugh. But it's mine, and the closest clinic's 3 hours away. Not to mention I can't exactly afford their definition of urgent. Ben looked up, caught by something in her tone. Honesty layered with quiet defiance. Well, he said, rising to his feet, you came to the right place. I've been told I can fix just about anything, especially things that matter. She smiled again, softer this time. We'll see about that. Ben gestured to the workbench, already clearing space in his mind. He didn't know yet how this repair would reshape his days, but something in her gaze told him he wasn't the only one hoping for more than just a quick fix. Lily had only been gone an hour, the scent of her citrus shampoo still lingering in the air when Ben found himself staring at the worn prosthetic she'd left behind. She was coming back tomorrow, same time, for the fitting. He had offered to take a closer look overnight, and she had trusted him without hesitation. That trust weighed heavier on him than he expected. The device lay open on his bench like a puzzle half solved. He ran his fingers across the misaligned hydraulic piston, noting the way it caught at a certain angle. Whoever built it had done just enough to keep it functioning, but nowhere near enough to make it thrive. Ben could feel something stirring, a restlessness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He flipped on the overhead lamp, its harsh light illuminating old sketches tacked to the wall behind his desk. Designs he hadn't touched in a decade. One caught his eye, a modular joint system with interchangeable components. He remembered drawing it during his father's last weeks, the same month he turned down a spot in a biomedical incubator to care for the old man. Ben reached for his drafting pencil. By midnight, his workbench was covered in paper, scrap metal, and half-empty mugs of coffee. Each stroke of graphite across graph paper felt like exhaling after holding his breath too long. He referenced mechanics textbooks he hadn't opened in years, toggled through pages of online journals, even reactivated a dusty CAD program on his ancient laptop. He miscalculated once, accidentally sent a spring flying across the room and jabbed his own hand with a file. It bled more than expected, and he cursed under his breath, cradling his palm. But when he looked down at the rough sketch in front of him, the pain barely registered. For the first time in years, he wasn't just fixing something. He was building, creating. Outside, Fairview Springs had long gone to sleep, but inside Carter's auto, light poured from the windows like a silent vow. Ben didn't know if this new design would work, but what he did know, as he cleaned the wound on his hand and went right back to sketching, was this. He wasn't just repairing a prosthetic. He was waking up something inside himself that had been quiet for far too long, and Lily Grant was the reason. The next evening, just as the last light slipped behind the hills, Lily rolled into the shop balancing 2 takeout bags on her lap and a coffee cup tucked precariously between her fingers. Ben rushed to help, almost knocking over a crate of brake pads in the process. "You didn't have to bring anything," he said, taking the bags. "I wanted to," she replied. "Besides, if you're going to save my leg, the least I can do is feed you." They ate at the workbench, paper containers spread out between bolts, blueprints, and soldering tools. Lily picked at her food with chopsticks, her fingers deft despite the occasional tremble. "I wasn't always like this, you know," she said quietly. Ben looked up, waiting. "I used to run track, sprinter, nationally ranked," she added almost reluctantly. "Until the accident, drunk driver, they got a broken wrist. I lost everything below the knee." "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. "Don't be." She shrugged, then paused. "No, that's not fair. Be sorry for the pain, maybe, but not for where it led me." Ben didn't know what to say to that. He'd fixed a lot of things in his life, but this, the resilience in her voice, the unspoken grief, wasn't something that needed fixing. It needed understanding. "So," she continued, changing the subject, "tell me how a small-town mechanic knows more about prosthetics than the people who built this thing." He chuckled. Once had a dream of building them. I was studying mechanical systems with a focus in bioadaptation. Even got accepted into a research program after the Army. Then Dad got sick. I came home to take care of him. Never left. She nodded, like she understood more than she let on. That's not giving up, you know. That's pausing for the right reason. They worked late into the night, Lily offering surprisingly technical insights as Ben tested joint prototypes and hydraulic tweaks. At one point, she adjusted the pressure valve on a component and murmured, "You're overcompensating here. Try offsetting the center of mass." He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Not your first time around this kind of tech?" Her smile was small, almost secretive. "Let's just say I've picked up a few things." By the time midnight came, they were leaning closer, laughing easier. The hum of the shop blended with the quiet rhythm of collaboration, of connection. As Lily reviewed one of Ben's sketches, her sleeve brushed his arm, and for a moment neither of them moved. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, something rare and quiet bloomed. Trust forged not from grand gestures but from soaring wires and shared silences. And as Lily finally said goodnight, promising to return tomorrow, Ben found himself watching the door long after it closed, already missing her presence in a space that suddenly felt too still. By the third evening, their routine felt less like coincidence and more like gravity. Lily arrived just after sunset, always with something in hand: blueberry muffins, a fresh printout of technical specs, once even a spare motor she said she'd found lying around. Ben never questioned where she got these things, though part of him wanted to. Tonight, as they huddled over the evolving prototype, Ben noticed something odd. The way Lily navigated his custom diagnostic software like a pro, how she anticipated circuit behavior before he explained it. Her fingers moved with the muscle memory of someone who had done this many times before. "Where'd you learn all this?" he asked casually, trying not to sound suspicious. Lily didn't look up. "I read a lot." He let it go, but her answer echoed longer than it should have. Later, while searching for a reference diagram in a drawer long untouched, he stumbled on something he hadn't seen in years: a local paper from the regional high school archives. Folded inside was a sports feature. Lillian Grant, Olympic hopeful turns tragedy into mission. The article was short but unmistakable. Same eyes, same fire. Ben returned the paper to the drawer, slowly, deliberately. She hadn't told him her full name, and she clearly didn't want him digging into her past. Back at the workbench, Lily was tightening the bolts on the hydraulic housing, humming something soft and familiar. Ben watched her in silence, choosing not to ask. Not yet. Secrets had a way of surfacing when they were ready, and something about the way she focused so intently on every detail told him that, for now, this, what they were building, both in metal and in trust, was more important than any name she didn't say. So he picked up a wrench and got back to work, letting the questions wait for another night. The prototype lay on the workbench like a promise half-whispered. Sleek lines, reinforced joints, precision-calibrated hydraulics. Ben ran through every final check twice, then a third time for luck, his hands moving with a nervous energy he hadn't felt since his first Army deployment. Across the room, Lily had changed into fitted athletic wear, the kind built for movement, not comfort. Her hair was tied back, her eyes unreadable. "You sure you're ready?" Ben asked. "No," she admitted. "But I want to be." He helped her into position near the parallel bars they'd set up between the lift and the tire rack. The shop had never seen anything like this: metal, grease, and the quiet breath before something extraordinary. He knelt beside her, sliding the prosthetic into place, adjusting the socket gently against the sensitive skin where flesh met machine. "It might feel weird at first," he said. "Let your body tell you. Don't force anything." She nodded, then gripped the bars. The first step was shaky, her arms bearing more weight than the leg, but the joint responded. A half-second delay, and then fluid movement. Ben watched every micro-adjustment, every breath she took. Second step. Stronger. Third step. Smoother. She paused, blinking back sudden tears. Ben. It's working. I know, he said softly, though his throat had tightened. It really is. She turned toward him, still gripping the bars. Her chest rose and fell with the weight of disbelief melting into relief, into joy. Then, without thinking, she let go of one bar and reached for him instead. Ben caught her instinctively, steadying her, but she didn't stop there. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him close. Their faces were inches apart. "Thank you," she whispered, her breath brushing his cheek. And then she kissed him. It wasn't perfect. He smelled of soldering flux and she tasted faintly of adrenaline, but it was real. And in that small, quiet moment, surrounded by tools and schematics and the faint hum of the shop fan, they stopped being just builder and patient. When they finally pulled apart, Lily was smiling through tears. "I haven't walked like that in 3 years," she said. Ben reached up to brush a lock of hair from her forehead, his voice a little hoarse. "You just took your first step. Let's see how far we can go." The next day passed in silence. Ben arrived early, the prototype gleaming under a fresh layer of polish, every bolt tightened, every pressure valve recalibrated. He'd even rearranged part of the shop, cleared a walking path, made space for more advanced mobility tests. He brewed an extra pot of coffee. He waited, but Lily didn't come. No message, no call, just absence. By evening, the shadows grew long across the shop floor, but still, no wheels on gravel, no voice calling out, "Hope I'm not late." He checked his phone again, though it hadn't buzzed. Checked his email. Nothing. He tried to keep busy, reorganizing tools, reviewing torque specs, but the stillness kept crawling back in, wrapping around his thoughts like thick smoke. It wasn't just her absence. It was the suddenness of it. The way she'd held him the night before, the way she had whispered thank you like it meant something deeper. And now, nothing. As he turned to close up the shop, something caught his eye. An envelope had been slipped under the front door. No name, just a soft white card and a single handwritten line. "I'm sorry." Ben read it twice, his fingers tightening around the paper. There was no explanation, no return address, just that one heavy phrase. He stared at the empty wheelchair ramp she'd rolled down so confidently days before. Whatever had pulled her away, it hadn't been casual, and whatever she'd meant to protect by leaving him in silence, it left him surrounded by a noise he couldn't shut out. He turned off the lights one by one, the final switch clicking into darkness, unsure if she was ever coming back, or if what they'd built was already over before it had a chance to begin. The morning after the note arrived, Ben stood at the edge of his shop's parking lot, a half-full mug of coffee cooling in his hand. The sun was just beginning to burn the mist off the hills, painting the world in gold and promise, but his thoughts were rooted in the cold uncertainty of the previous day. Then he heard it, distant at first, like thunder caught on a breeze, the thump, thump, thump of rotor blades. He looked up. A sleek black helicopter appeared above the tree line, bearing down on the gravel lot with confident precision. Its descent whipped dust into spirals and sent loose papers flying across the workshop. Ben shielded his eyes as the aircraft touched down, disbelief making his heartbeat louder than the rotors. The door opened. She stepped out. Lily. No, not quite Lily now. Dressed in a crisp gray suit, hair pinned with surgical exactness, she moved with a different kind of authority. But it was still his prosthetic beneath her, supporting every smooth step she took as she crossed the lot. And her eyes, though calm, carried the weight of unsaid things. "Hi, Ben," she said, her voice steady over the dying roar of the blades. "I believe I owe you an explanation." He didn't answer at first, just stared, his heart wrestling confusion and something that felt dangerously close to betrayal. "I'm not just Lily Grant," she continued. "I'm Lillian Grant, CEO of Grant Orthotech. The name hit like a wrench to the gut. She paused as if bracing herself. I wanted to tell you, so many times, but I didn't want you to see me through that lens. I needed you to see me. Just a woman trying to walk again, not a billion-dollar last name or a company logo. Ben exhaled sharply. So this was what? Market research? No, she said quickly, stepping closer. God, no. You weren't a test. You were the only real thing I've had in years. One of the men from the helicopter stepped forward with a folder in hand. Ms. Grant, the proposal. She waved him off without looking. I came here to ask you something, she said, eyes never leaving Ben's. Grant Orthotech wants to build what you created. Fund it, distribute it, but only if you're the one leading the design. Complete creative control. No red tape. Ben's mind spun, but her voice cut through the noise. And whatever we were, I hope that matters too, because none of it was fake. As the wind from the helicopter began to settle, so did something inside him. But in the space between her words and his answer, 100 unspoken questions still hung heavy in the air. The helicopter was gone, but its echo lingered in the hollow of Ben's chest long after the sky turned still again. He sat alone at his workbench, the proposal folder unopened beside him, its thick edges brushing against an oil-smudged notepad that felt far more familiar. Outside, the town moved like any other day, tires on asphalt, birdsong between quiet gusts, but inside the shop, time had slowed to a crawl. He could still hear Lily's voice. Complete control. No red tape. It was everything he'd once dreamed of. A chance to make something real, something that could change lives. But now that it stood before him, offered on company letterhead, why did it feel so uncertain? Ben flipped the folder open just enough to glimpse blueprints and contract terms. They were detailed, precise, probably drawn up by a dozen lawyers and engineers. But next to his own sketches, messy, passionate, drawn on the back of diner napkins and worn graph paper, they felt clinical. Cold. He turned toward the corner cabinet and pulled out something buried beneath layers of rags and rust. A small, hand-drawn diagram taped to yellowing cardboard. It was his father's old design for a rudimentary prosthetic, hinged at the knee, padded at the socket, built for wounded soldiers who had nothing but field tools and hope. Ben remembered the day his father had shown it to him. Sometimes you won't have the right tools, he'd said. But if you lead with your heart, you'll always have enough. He ran his thumb over the faded lines, his breath steadying. The question wasn't whether Lily had lied. It was whether what they'd built was stronger than the lie. Ben stood slowly and looked around the shop, the oil-stained floor, the shelves of salvaged parts, the bare bulb swaying from the ceiling, and knew his answer wouldn't come from polished boardrooms or contracts. It would come from the same place every great repair started, with a quiet decision to try. He reached for the prototype, brushing off a fine layer of dust. No matter what title Lily carried or what company stood behind her now, one truth remained. This design was born here, and he wasn't done building it yet. 2 days passed before she returned, not in a helicopter this time, but in a quiet black sedan that pulled up just before sunset. Lily stepped out alone, her suit jacket gone, replaced by a soft gray sweater and worn jeans. She looked more like the woman who used to wheel through his garage door with takeout and soldering tips than the CEO who had vanished in a cloud of corporate polish. Ben was at his workbench when she entered, hands deep in the housing of a gear reducer. He didn't look up right away. I brought coffee, she said gently, setting 2 cups on the counter. 1 cream, no sugar. Still your thing? He glanced up, eyes meeting hers, then nodded slowly. Still my thing. There was a long silence as she scanned the familiar space. Nothing had changed, except perhaps the air between them. You read the proposal? She asked. I did, Ben said, wiping his hands. It's solid. Too solid. Feels like a machine wrote it. Lily laughed softly, tension easing just a fraction. Our legal team kind of are machines. I'm in, he said, before she could say more. But under one condition. Her eyes widened. Name it. We keep this place, not just as a memory but as a lab, a training space, for kids, veterans, anyone with hands and heart who wants to build something that matters. Lily blinked, caught off guard, but then nodded, her expression softening into something deeper than agreement. Deal. They stood side by side at the bench, unrolling blueprints, her tablet beside his pencil sketches, blending corporate precision with raw imagination. They moved in sync, tweaking design specs, debating materials, laughing quietly like the old rhythm had never been interrupted. At one point, Ben looked at her, really looked, and asked the question he'd been holding. Was any of it, before, just part of the plan? She met his eyes, steady and unwavering. None of it was a plan, Ben. Not the coffee, not the prototypes, and definitely not the kiss. The words hung between them for a heartbeat. Then Lily reached across the bench, her hand finding his. I didn't just find my prosthetic here, she whispered. I found my footing. And though neither said it out loud, they both knew. The work ahead would be demanding. The world would ask questions. But right here, right now, they had everything they needed. Purpose, partnership, and something quietly blossoming between the lines. It started with a headline. Ben was pouring coffee one morning when Lily stormed into the workshop, tablet in hand, jaw clenched tight. She slapped the device onto the counter, spinning it so he could see. The screen showed a press release. New startup launches affordable prosthetic model using breakthrough hydraulic design. He read it once, then again. The image beside the article was damning. It was their design. Stripped down, cheaply manufactured but unmistakably based on the prototype they'd built together. Same pivot angles, same pressure modulation system. The name of the startup? Metagenics, one of Grant Orthotech's longtime corporate rivals. They reverse-engineered one of our early models, Lily said, her voice low and tight, bought it through a dummy distributor, tore it apart, and launched ahead of schedule. No innovation, just replication. Ben didn't speak right away. He studied the grainy product photo, noted the shortcuts, inferior alloy at the joint, reduced torque capacity, a socket that looked mass-printed and uncustomized. They cut corners, he muttered. That joint won't last 3 months under regular use. Doesn't matter, Lily said. The media doesn't see that. All they see is a price tag 30% lower than ours. He looked up. Then we don't fight them with specs. We fight them with people. She blinked. What do you mean? We show them what real looks like, Ben said. Testimonials, videos, the people using these every day. Show the world the difference between walking and really walking. Lily's gaze sharpened. We've been working on the adaptive sports line. We could launch it now, get ahead before they even think to imitate it. We get our first users in front of cameras, Ben continued. Not actors, the real ones, like Jorge with the hiking leg, and Mira, the ballet instructor. Show what this tech can really do. Within hours, Lily was on the phone with their marketing team, calling in favors and fast-tracking their sports division. Meanwhile, Ben adjusted the prototypes, tweaking pressure sensors and customizing fittings for the returning users. By week's end, they had a campaign ready, built by hands that understand, trusted by those who walk every day. Their clients sent in raw footage, laughing mid-run, dancing on theater stages, even scaling rocky hillsides. The contrast to Metagenics' sterile promo video was stark. And when the campaign launched, it didn't just reclaim the spotlight. It reminded everyone why the original mattered. More than that, it reminded Ben and Lily what they were building wasn't just a product. It was proof that when heart meets craft, no copy can come close. The call came just after midnight, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Lily answered on the first ring, her voice thick with sleep. Ben was already slipping on his jacket when she looked at him across the apartment. One of the sports units failed during a sprint trial. No injuries, but the joint seized mid-stride. They've halted testing until we investigate. 15 minutes later, they were back at the workshop, the fluorescent lights flickering to life above the prototype in question. Ben examined the joint with surgical precision. "This isn't wear and tear," he said grimly. "The metal's microstructure has shifted, stress fatigue we didn't see in the batch tests." Lily was already at the computer, pulling up sourcing data. "These components came from our secondary supplier. They changed the heat treatment process, didn't flag it." Ben swore under his breath, running a hand through his hair. "How many units use these parts?" She hesitated. 5,000. The number landed like a hammer between them. Ben's shoulders dropped. "We have to recall them. Every single one." "I know," Lily said, already typing. "It'll cost millions, but we won't risk anyone's safety." He watched her work. No hesitation, no spin, just immediate action. Not a CEO worried about bottom lines, a leader who understood what mattered, and something in that steadied him. "I can fix it," he said quietly. "Not just patch it. Redesign the entire pressure system. Eliminate the stress points. We'll upgrade every recalled unit with a better version." She looked up from the screen. "How long?" 3 days to design. 2 weeks to produce and retrofit," he replied, already pulling down his drafting templates. "We'll need full integration with production, access to materials. I'll coordinate with the testing engineers." "You won't do it alone," Lily said firmly. "We fix this together." For the next 72 hours, the workshop never slept. Engineers came and went, fresh coffee brewed in place of meals. Lily worked beside Ben, recalibrating testing metrics and overseeing component tolerances. He burned through 3 pencils the first night, wearing the erasers to stubs. By dawn on the 3rd day, they had a working prototype, a modular pressure distribution system with reinforced internal bracing and zero heat treatment sensitivity. It passed every stress test. Twice. That evening, Lily stood in the center of the shop, watching as one of their test runners took off down the makeshift track they'd set up behind the garage. The new joint held perfectly, flexing, absorbing, launching. She turned to Ben, exhausted but glowing. "We didn't just fix it." "No," he said with a tired smile. "We made it better." And in that shared moment, beneath buzzing lights and the scent of hot metal, they remembered something vital. Setbacks didn't define them. The way they answered them did. The sun had dipped behind the hills, casting a soft amber glow through the high windows of Carter's Auto, though it was no longer just a repair shop. A new plaque gleamed near the front entrance, the Carter Grant Innovation Center. Inside, the original walls remained, still lined with tools and the scent of oil and steel, but beside the rusted tool chests stood polished prototypes, lab benches, and a wall-size screen displaying design simulations in real time. Ben adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, standing near his old workbench now adorned with white roses and a wooden box carved with initials. His tux still had a grease stain on the cuff. He'd been making last-minute tweaks to a pediatric prosthetic that morning, and Lily wouldn't have had it any other way. She entered quietly through the side door, the train of her ivory gown gliding across the concrete floor like memory meeting purpose. Her prosthetic, now almost indistinguishable from natural motion, carried her with ease and grace as she reached him, her fingers brushing his. "I couldn't leave without saying goodbye to where it all began," she whispered. "Actually," Ben replied, lifting the box from the bench, "I wanted to give you your real wedding present." She opened the lid and gasped. Inside lay the original key to the garage, cleaned, polished, and threaded onto a silver chain. "You're giving me your father's key?" she asked, her voice soft, trembling. "I'm giving us a future," he said. "The board approved it this morning. This place is staying just like this. Our center for young engineers, veterans, dreamers. A space for anyone with an idea and the courage to build it. Tears gathered in her eyes as he fastened the necklace around her neck. Then, without prompting, she took his hand and guided him to the middle of the room. "Dance with me," she said, her smile glowing. So they did, slowly, tenderly. Beneath the same hanging lights in the place where sketches became limbs and silence became laughter. They danced not just for the joy of the moment, but for every broken thing they'd made whole together. Outside, the sky burned with color, and inside, love hummed louder than any machine. We often think our biggest creations come from plans, from institutions, from polished labs and funding proposals. But sometimes the most revolutionary work begins where no one's looking, inside a dusty garage, between two people who believe just enough in possibility to get their hands dirty. Ben Carter wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't even looking for a second chance. But when he chose to help a stranger, not for profit, not for recognition, but simply because he could, he rebuilt more than a limb. He rebuilt hope. And Lily Grant? She could have led with her title, her empire, her legacy, but instead she led with vulnerability. And in that choice, she rediscovered not just mobility, but meaning. Together, they proved something timeless, that the best designs aren't just measured in torque and tensile strength, they're measured in intention, in resilience, in love. So, wherever you are in your own story, whether you're building alone or broken, whether you're holding a tool or holding someone's hand, remember this. You don't have to start with everything. You just have to start with heart.